Yeah, Ellie, when you're ready, let's go on the walk.
Brilliant. Right.
Oh, you're going to film the show? Okay. So, okay, if I start, folks, we'll probably split this into two parts. So we'll do a little quick look at the estate first, just from where we're standing. So you get a nice open aspect, because this is Blaise Castle Estate in North Bristol. And like the other big kind of rich people estates, I call them, like King's Weston House and Ashton Court, they tend to have a few elements to them. So the bulk of the walk is we're going to go into the woods and have a look at the different trees and some of the other stuff that's there. I know Pete's really keen to find some mushrooms, because that's really his bag as well. And then we've got Steve here. When I struggle with the species, Steve is our proper tree boffin. But it might help to start with to just show you, if Ellie pans round, we've got you know, a lot of non-native trees here. So as you probably guess, non-native just means they're not originally from Britain. And really, these big rich estates were owned by aristocracy. And back in the 1800s, of course, they didn't have those big status symbols that people have now, kind of Cartier watches and Bentley cars and things like that. So they used to show off, I suppose, by planting amazing species of trees from all around the world. And it was really, really, they should make a TV drama about this, because it was really quite cutthroat. There would be fights over this. They would send spies out onto different continents to bring the seeds and the saplings back. And it was really, you know, a boasting competition, how exotic and how large you could get your trees on the estate. So if we see here, if Ellie pans over to where the children's play park is, there's a beautiful kind of orangey tree there. That's a red oak, so not native. So there's a few different oaks on site here. We're going to look at some English oak and some sessile oak, which are both native, both British trees. Panning slightly to the right, you've got quite a few of these cedars, which are just describing that. It's like almost horizontal plates through that tree. That's a cedar of Lebanon, obviously from Lebanon and Asia and Middle East. Beautiful, beautiful big trees. Coming into the middle, if you can see that, Ellie, there's a huge big redwood there. I think that's a coastal redwood, Steve, is it?
Wellingtonia.
Oh, it is Wellingtonia. So that's giant redwood. Yeah. And then just to the right of that, we've got another kind of non-native oak, the big, big tree with a canopy that's almost touching the ground. There's a lady just walking in front of it with a pink jacket on and her dog. That's a holm oak, or some people call that a holly oak. So another beautiful evergreen oak, unpopular in some parts because they do get a bit invasive and can bully out the native trees. But you can see there in this setting, that's gorgeous. And quite a lot of native limes around. So we've got the yellowy looking trees behind the holm oak and over towards the building. There's a lot of limes. We plant a lot of those through Bristol. They're a very good urban tree because they're very resistant to pollution, really, from urban environments. So that's just to give you an idea of the kind of open aspect of the estate, a little bit of their history, that people used to use trees as a status symbol. And now we're going to have a little walk into the woods, kind of concentrate on some native species. We'll have a look at some leaves. We'll maybe have a look at stuff that's edible and stuff that's definitely not. We might try and find some poisonous things, and just have a look at the different types of trees and what they're good for and what they could be used for. Yeah, just try to get some practice recognizing some stuff, really. Is that okay? So if we walk
Sounds great.
Into the woods. Here's a nice one to start with. Relying on Steve to keep me right. So Blaise is blessed with a lot of big old native oak trees. This is English oak.
Yes,
it is English oak. So
Quercus
robur. We'll get a bit Latin. So this is what we call a lobed leaf. So it has these lobes, a bit like earlobes on it. We can tell it's English oak and not the other native oak, sessile oak, because it hasn't got a stalk on the leaf. So English oak, it's quite complicated. English oak doesn't have stalks on the leaves, but does have little stalks on its acorns. And sessile sile oak is easier to identify because it's the other way around. It does have stalks on the leaves, but no stalks on the acorns. So very, very popular tree in this country. There were huge amounts planted for the old Napoleonic Wars. We used to build our ships out of oak. So, you know, really important tree. It's the symbol of the National Trust, if you ever see those brown signs around. So, you know, really, really iconic and gorgeous tree. Okay, so that's first number one native tree.
Oh, European lime.
European lime, okay. So here we've got a lovely heart-shaped leaf with a kind of serrated edge. We call these pinnate leaves. So they're like leafy leaves, I call them. They look like a normal leaf. If you're drawing a tree, you tend to draw them with leaves like this. It's got a serrated edge, like a sawtooth, and this is common lime. It's really we should have had a look outside. Actually, it's really popular host for mistletoe as well. Mistletoe loves to live in this tree. So when we get back out of the woods, we'll maybe have a look up, and you'll see the huge ball-shaped growths in the tree. They're easier to spot in winter, actually, when the trees lose a leaf. These are edible, not particularly this time of year. I'll have a little nibble. But when they first come through, they're almost yellow and translucent, and they're a really nice kind of peppery salad leaf. What these trees tend to do is they grow some small growth out the bottom of them called epicormic growth. And as long as you pick them above dogwee level, as I say, in spring and early summer, these leaves are really, really good to eat. But you have to be very sure you're eating lime leaves and not something else that might be poisonous. But yeah, so we've had the English oak and we got the lime tree, common lime.
Historically, lime, the lime leaves are edible, but historically, like as a children's treat, they'd wait around for aphids to breed on the leaves, and the aphids secrete kind of, like this goo. It's called honeydew, and it's really, really sweet. It's all the sugars that the aphids are, or greenfly aphids, that are be sucking out of the tree and then secreting back onto the leaf. So you brush all those off and kind of munch it down. It's a sweet kind of lettucey treat.
Interesting. Yeah. And the younger leaves are more palatable and less bitter, I believe.
Okay, there's going to be something interesting in the salad.
So if anybody wants a leaf to eat as well as to do the crafts, you're allowed to request that as well.
What have you spotted, John?
Right, here's our most common British broadleaf tree. Not for long, because this is the ash, and unfortunately there's a nasty disease coming through at the moment, Chalera dieback, and it's killing a lot of our ash off. But it's, you know, really, really, really shame. I don't know, Steve, would you say this has it? Because it's not looking very well.
Right. This one, well, actually, although it's that's a note, but
this is the ash here.
Oh yeah, of course,
yeah.
Got you.
But it's been stripped here by
That looks like squirrel.
Yeah, that looks like squirrel damage on this thing. We'll keep an eye out. I mean, there's not much left of this.
There's not.
Crown.
No, but they're quite easy to spot. This is what we call a compound leaf. So this is the leaf, and it's made up of little leaflets. We might see some elder is very similar, and some rowan has similar leaves. There's an old folk tales about a lot of these trees, and I love this one because generally in the ash tree it tends to have an odd number of leaflets. So this one has 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. They can have up to 17. But let me get this right, in the early 1800s, it was common for girls, especially in those days, to wander through the woods, a bit like looking for a 4-leaf clover, looking for an ash leaf with an even number of leaflets on. Like that. So now it only has 2, 4, 6, 8. And if you found a ash leaf with an even number of leaflets on, they would pick it off the tree, fold it up, so it fit in their left shoe. That was important, apparently, and that would ensure that they met a suitable husband. Right? If they just cheated and pulled one off like that, they would. I don't know what would happen. They would meet a rogue and a blackguard, but very unsuitable husband. But that was so. A lot of these trees have these mad old English stories, and you know, there's a lot of witchcraft and tradition and folklore and superstition about them. But I think that's my favourite, the ash tree, and it's an odd number of leaves. So there you go.
Yeah, good story. And also sort of very identifiable with ash trees. They've got these black buds. So if you can see, zoom in and see the black bud and the tips.
Almost like deer hooves, aren't they?
Yeah,
Black velvety.
there's not many other species that have got these black buds, so that's one way of identifying an ash. And also the branches grew in opposites, so rather than alternates, they grew in opposites on ash.
I could see that. Can you see that?
So for instance,
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, brilliant.
these two branches here, so they grew opposite each other. That's their growth habit. And same with these two branches and the two up there.
Brilliant.
Okay. There's another one here. We're not getting very far. We're going to walk so far. It's more of a stand, isn't it? This is a real easy one to identify. So this is, I'll pick a better leaf off than that. This is sycamore. It's a really popular tree in Britain, but it's not a native tree, but it did come over about 8,000 years ago. So it's like naturalized, isn't it, rather than native?
1600s, isn't it? 1500s.
Oh, was it as recent as that? Okay,
I think so, yeah, but it's yeah, I mean, it's naturalized.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is spread everywhere, and it's done really well.
I heard that it would have come over here naturally anyway, if it was not like brought over.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think
Yeah.
like post ice age, it's like a moment where it didn't come over, but it would have
It
done
very well
yeah,
could have.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a bit of a, is it native? Is it not?
Yeah.
Kind of argument.
yeah.
I mean, it absolutely thrives here. So it's, you know, and it's the good thing we're talking about ash dieback, habitat wise. So the stuff that lives in ash trees tends to like about 80% of the stuff that lives in ash trees tends to like sycamore. So planting it as a replacement isn't a bad idea. This is a palmate leaf. So palmate as in palm of hand. Doesn't look much like a hand, but you get the drift. It often has very, very red stalks on it. So it's easy to identify from other maple trees. Very large leaves in it, often gets this tar spot on it, which I believe is a fungus.
Yeah, sycamore tar spot.
Hmm.
It's not harmful to the tree. If anything, it can be an indication of the tree's health, and you tend not to get sycamore tar spot in polluted areas. So it's an indication that we're in a nice unpolluted woodland.
Let's actually walk.
We've had a request in the chat from Lizzie for an ash bronc with an even number of leaves with a laughy face. I think that's a joke, but also if you find one.
We'll keep our eyes peeled. We'll send it over ready to put in your shoe.
Ash tree sapling, which have clearly succumbed to ash dieback disease. So, you know, we've just got all this brittle branching. We get all this sort of black, grey, and usually these sort of diamond-shaped lesions. And it tends to affect all the younger trees die from it first, unfortunately. The more mature ash trees have got more resistance to it. But they eventually can succumb to it as well, unfortunately. Experts at the moment believe that maybe between 1 to 5% of ash trees are resistant.
So we've had a question in the chat that says, is sycamore tree a type of maple tree?
It is, yeah. So, it's of the Acer species. So sycamore is Acer pseudoplatanus, which actually means pseudoplatanus actually means sort of pseudo means sort of fake, maybe. So it's similar to a plain leaf in shape. So hence it's not a plain leaf, so hence pseudoplatanus. But yes, you're right, yeah, it's a type of Acer.
Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay. We've got some hazel here. Another easy one to identify. It's almost like a circular leaf with a little Harry Potter wizard's hat point on it. So it tends to grow, if you can get in there really, like a multi-stem. So it's not a traditional tree with one kind of thick trunk. It grows up, and it's traditionally it would be coppiced because they're very straight. These limbs that come up, or these stems that come up. It's a really useful tree. So kids love it for building dens and bows for bows and arrows. It's traditionally used for fencing and dead hedging. Squirrels love it because they get hazelnuts on. I heard an interesting fact. I don't know how true this is. I don't want to fill you with false information, but 75% of all the hazelnuts cultivated, so planted on purpose throughout the world, are used in Nutella, the chocolate spread. So that's a lot of hazelnuts. But yeah, we tend not to get them on the wild up in here in Blaze because the squirrels get to them first. But yeah, another beautiful tree. Really, really excellent native habitat tree. It'll support certain species of butterflies and moths that simply won't live in any other species. So if you don't have hazel, you don't get those species of butterflies and moths. So it's got you see there the very green buds, and like Steve pointed out, the buds and the limbs on ash tree are opposites. This is a good example of an alternate budding. So they kind of go up the stem in a zigzag. So it just helps for that ID when you've got no leaves on, actually, to know the pattern of the buds. There's some great online resources if you're out looking to identify trees from the Woodland Trust. I think you guys have got some as well, haven't you?
Sir?
Online kind of ID stuff around buds and
Yeah.
the Forest of Avon.
Put a link through or something.
Yeah, we can send some links afterwards so that you can have a look at those resources. We're just walking up the path now, and there's a beautiful canopy of autumn leaves, lots of different colours.
This is lime canopy.
And we're just under a lime tree. Do let us know if anything catches your eye and you want us to stop.
Again, we've got a little stand of young ash trees there, which are looking very sorry for themselves, really.
They do, don't they?
So Anna says it's very green down there compared to Glasgow, and Amanda says, how old are the trees?
Leaves. I mean, there's a bit of a mixture, really, isn't there, John?
Yeah.
History.
A lot of the stuff we looked at the very start of the session, out the big red oaks and the older limes on the estate will be hundreds of years old, whereas we're in pretty much a native, not unmanaged but semi-managed woodland, so there'll be all different ages of trees within here. When we get one of the mature limes, we'll try and estimate the age for you to give you an idea.
Yeah. And some of the oaks as well, they're more slower growing. So the oaks that have got much bigger trunks to them. I mean, they could be up to a couple of 100 years old, I guess.
That one looks pretty old there.
I've just found something on this oak that might be quite interesting. So you can see it's growing here. Here's one that I just picked off earlier. So this is called a gall, an oak gall. And basically there's a type of wasp, tiny little wasp that lays its egg in the bud on the whilst it's growing, and it releases a kind of chemical that tricks the oak into instead of growing an acorn like a seed, it grows this woody husk, this woody shell around a little grub, the little grub that the wasp will develop in. And you can see on this one it's got a little hole where the gall wasp has chewed out and then flown off, so it creates this perfect kind of refuge for the wasp to develop in without being disturbed or hurt in any way. Kind of amazing little parasite. But something interesting with oak galls is they used to use it for making ink and dye. So you get an incredibly dark black ink from oak galls. So traditionally that's how black ink for like writing with a quill would have been made.
Interesting. Yeah.
We'll have to put that one in our pocket.
Yeah.
I'm
Anna-
going to keep that one.
Hannah says, I have some oak galls that I use to tone a print sort of black colour.
Oh, nice. I made my wife, when I first met her, a necklace out of them, and she was initially very pleased. And then when she learned that they were full of all they used to have wasp grubs in them, she was a little freaked out.
Lots of dogs running around here.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
met some lovely dogs.
So there's a horse chestnut here, Ellie.
Oh, wow.
I cut one off
Oh, nice.
earlier, so it's another example, a bit like the sycamore that people think of this. It's conker tree, and people think of it as traditional British, but it's not. I heard, I don't know if this is right, that it came over with the Romans about 5,000 years ago, and the conkers, the chestnuts themselves, aren't edible for us. That's the sweet chestnut that you roast. But the horse chestnuts could be ground down with a bit of water and made into a poultice,
I didn't know
and
what
that
she
would be
was
rubbed on the horses when they got lame to try and soothe kind of aches and pains, and it's got a natural antibacterial property in, so you know, cuts and wounds, it would help. I know my mum's a big fan of Baddidas bubble bath, and that's got horse chestnut extract in. She always gets some at Christmas because it's dead expensive. I can't afford it any other time. But yeah, quite easy to spot. It's got a very distinctive leaf on it. The sweet chestnut's kind of similar, but it has a serrated edge. I'm sure there's some sweet chestnut in here, so we'll have a look. You can identify these by feel, because the buds in there, if I touch that, they're tremendously sticky, really, really sticky buds, and they're quite big, and they're almost like spears. They're a bit like a beech bud, but much, much bigger and fatter, and as I say, really, really sticky for me to just touch that. So there you go, horse chestnut.
Sorry.
Also, I was going to point out the brown splotching on the leaves is the horse chestnut leaf miner. So it gets inside the leaf margins and just sort of tunnels through the leaf. So very, very common for horse chestnuts. Sort of late summer, you can see the majority of horse chestnuts, the whole crown canopy is just all the foliage has been affected. And it doesn't necessarily harm the tree, it's just aesthetically a bit unpleasing. We get a lot of inquiries coming from the public wondering what's happened to the tree and you know, worried about the health of the tree. But generally it has nice healthy foliage for long enough in the summer to photosynthesize and get all the sugars and energy it needs to store for the winter, ready to kickstart the next summer, next spring.
So just to describe those leaves, they're kind of a bit like a sort of explosion or a star shape that's a kind of a bit more rounded, a nice deep green with some brown bits on. And we've got a question that says, I think the question is why are they sticky? I guess referring to the buds.
That's a really good question. I have no idea.
I'm not too sure as well either, so I'm going to have to
We'll have to
look
look
that
that
one
up,
up. Yeah.
There you go, some
Yeah,
research
but-
for us.
Yeah, always
Yeah.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some poplar species. Balsam poplar have got sort of big sticky buds as well. And with the balsam poplar, you get a really pungent smell from them. You can smell them in woodlands, you know, from say 30 meters away type thing. Really strong smell. But yeah, I need to look that one up, and maybe it's an attraction or a repellent, maybe it repels certain insects or that type of thing, but certainly not the leaf miner.
I was just going to say, it's like this area over here is like quite a good example of when we were saying about like semi-managed. So you can see that this area of woodland is a bit more open, and if you look behind, you can see all of this laurel that's been cut down. And that's just going to allow a lot of the ground flora, the kind of ground plants to like come through and stuff like that. So just a nice example of the like woods being managed.
You can see actually that as they've done that, the ferns are looking really healthy. They're coming through very nicely. So you've got the traditional bracken ferny fern there, And this one's quite a good indicator of an older woodland. This is a hart's tongue fern. Hart's just an old English word for deer, so like a deer tongue fern.
You've got loads of names there, haven't it? 'Cause I've heard it as mother-in-law's tongue.
Oh, I thought that was yeah. There's a different type of plant.
Oh, right, maybe
with mother-in-law's tongue as well. No, you're probably right.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of this stuff's got loads and
So
loads of.
The bracken's got lots of little leaves kind of coming out from one central bit, and then there's lots of other little leaves within those bits coming out. And then the hart's tongue one is like kind of smoother and it's like kind of one long thing, but it's kind of got ridges on it.
It has, and on the back of the hart's tongue fern, you've got these little brown spore pockets on the back. They'll have a proper name, but that's what I call them.
Ferns are so important and like amazing as well, because as a plant they've remained basically unchanged. But like they're a really early species of plant that will have dominated the kind of world. Yeah, and have stayed basically unchanged. Yeah, so like we call it like a proto plant, and yeah, just they're amazing. I absolutely love fern.
Brilliant. Gonna keep walking along the path.
There we go, a classic example of epicormic growth on common line.
Oh wow.
So,
What did you call it?
so it's
Steve?
epicormic growth. So it's all this growth that sort of comes out of the base, and can grow quite far up the stem as well. It's just a natural characteristic of the European species, which is Tilia europaeus. Obviously, it can cause a bit of a problem when planted in the streets, because we need to manage it and we need to keep on top of it every year. So we have the gangs come round and remove the epicormic growth before it encroaches on the path and the roads. But as John said before, really good species because of air pollution tolerance, that type of thing.
I'll just zoom in a bit closer so that you can see this epicormic growth.
Epicormic.
Epicormic growth.
You can see how that would be an amazing kind of refuge for invertebrates and small kind of insects and stuff. There's just so many spots for insects to hide in there. So although, you know, got to get rid of it when it's on the paths, I think it's an amazing habitat to kind of leave on trees.
Yes, if we can leave it, we do. That's the thing. With street trees, when it comes to inspecting the trees for, you know, for health and safety, that type of thing, we need to have it removed so we can have a proper look at the base to look for, you know, for cavities and disease and so on. So that's why we have to move it, really, as well as the encroachment of the roads and footpaths, etc. So,
Is this a common lime?
common line.
Common
yes.
line.
Would it be worth trying, just for the earlier question, trying to age that one, Steve? Would you? So we're looking at maybe a metre across, slightly more than a metre in diameter. So
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that could be 150 years old, maybe. What would you say?
150.
Yeah, they are quite fast growing, particularly when they're younger, but they do reach a stage where they stop growing so much in height. You might get a bit when they reach maturity. They might start getting grow a little bit sort of in small increments on an annual basis in terms of canopy spread. But in terms of height, they won't grow much more. So, I mean, generally, they grow faster when they're younger in terms of trunk expansion. So they can grow anything between an inch to 2 inches in girth on an annual basis. So maybe 2 inches per year. And then as they grow older, this decreases to about maybe an inch or less, maybe a centimetre a year, maybe. So, but yeah, I mean, I would age that between 120 to 150 years. Obviously, the only true way of finding out an age, which is dendrology, isn't it? Is the term for figuring out the ages of trees. But there are certain methods, but counting the rings is obviously one of the best ways to do it. But obviously you've got to cut the tree down to be able to count the rings, which is
Could you do a
unrealistic.
core sample? Could you go in and just take a slither out? So you're all counting the rings, but just taking a portion of the tree?
That just crossed my mind there, John. Yeah, you could probably go in halfway, yeah, and then pull out a sample, and then you just get a sort of slither really across section, and then you could count the rings that way. Yeah.
And how do you age it by counting the rings?
So it's just annual growth rings, so you can see year by year. You'd actually get 2 rings within 1 year. You get the main annual growth ring, and then you'll get a secondary growth ring within that. But you just count the main ones. So it's pretty straightforward.
And you'll see, like in with the 2 rings, you'll get like one that's kind of a paler colour, generally that's wider, and that'll be all of the growth in the summer months. And then the tree does continue growing over winter, but it's a much slower process. So you get a more compact, dense wood, which is the kind of darker colour. So you can see how much the tree grew in the summer and in the winter each year.
To see if we can spot a log to show everyone.
Yeah, that'd be good. There's a little hawthorn tree here, Ellie. So very well, not so little actually for a hawthorn, but very common native tree. Again, brilliant habitat tree. So
That's really pretty.
I've got a little bit chopped off, so you can see there again. It's kind of got these lobed leaves. They're looking a bit worse for wear now. Used to be called in old England the bread and cheese tree because eating the leaves, the young leaves. So we're talking about April, May, picking them off. Again, a nice little peppery salad leaf, so really nice. And you can, even though the seeds of these contain cyanide, if you sieve them out and boil this up with a bit of sugar and salt, it makes a fairly passable ketchup. So it was popular during the Second World War when rationing meant we didn't have the same amount of tomatoes we do now. I did try it, and my one tip would be when you're sieving out the seeds, don't use a rusty sieve because your ketchup will just taste like iron filings. But I've heard a lot of tips around putting honey in and chili and things like that, and I have tasted some really decent hawthorn berry ketchup. So you can see they're nice and plump and red now. There you go.
Okay, so maybe everyone's feeling inspired.
Definitely have a go, but don't use a rusty sieve.
Top tip.
Yeah. So there's one of those home oaks. We saw the massive canopy tree down in the estate, and you can see it's home oak. People call it holly oak. It looks a little bit like a holly leaf. So its Latin is Quercus ilex, isn't it?
Ilex, yeah.
So all oaks are Quercus something, and holly is Ilex aquifolium. So it's kind of a cross between those two names. So holly oak's a good description for it. It can be invasive into native woodlands. It does tend to take over, and you can see it's very dense canopy, so it can shade out a lot of ground layer stuff underneath it. So from a kind of nature and diversity angle, it's not the best tree, but I think it's beautiful as well, and it is evergreen.
I love, yeah. I mean, there's a few perfect examples that you pointed out earlier.
That one's stunning.
Stunning. It's also worth mentioning it's one of the very few oak species that we see in Britain that are evergreen. So we've got all year round green colour.
I was just going to say it's 10 minutes to 11 now. I was wondering if it would make sense do we want to get to the castle, or are we just happy seeing lots of different trees?
I think we're a bit far from the castle. I'm not sure we're going to make it in 10 minutes. It's going to be a bit of a whirlwind run. But we have just spotted another tree that John's got a leaf for.
So just thought it's quite timely. This Steve just talked about evergreen. So this is a yew tree. So like pine and spruce and fir, it has kind of these needles rather than leaves. And it's one of our, we only have 3 coniferous trees native to Britain. So we've got the yew, the juniper, which is a bit generous to call it a tree, isn't it? But and the Scots pine.
Scots pine.
So this is very, very slow growing. So the fact that this yew tree in there is still relatively small doesn't mean that it's not quite old. Do you want to hazard a guess?
Yeah, there's that quite slow growing, but that could be 30 to 40 years, maybe.
30 to 40 years old.
Yeah.
So very, because they're very slow growing, if you think about what we were talking about with those rings, if you cut a yew tree down, the rings would be super, super close together. So it's very, very dense wood. So very hard, very strong. So, you know, again, back in ancient times, a bit of a historian today, it was used for longbows. So for archers to use for longbows. It's very poisonous to us. It has very strong, its Latin name is Taxus picatus, and it has taxines in it, which are super strong alkalis. So they, you know, for us, we can't digest them. If you eat the berries, it can kill you. If you eat the leaves, actually, it can as well. It certainly give you a very, very upset stomach. But deer find them absolutely tasty, and the birds do as well. Actually, I don't think the whole berry's poisonous. I think the flesh of the berry,
I think the flesh
is edible, but the seeds,
the seeds.
yeah, the seeds and the skin are super toxic. But yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful tree. My dad, when I was little, always told me the yew trees was where the fairies live. In fact, he still does, because he's a bit like that. But yeah, so yeah, gorgeous native conifer, the yew.
And aren't they some of the oldest trees in the country, yew trees?
Yeah, I think there's one in Fortingale churchyard that they've aged about 4,000 years.
Yeah.
And there's another one in Wales
There's one
somewhere.
in Wales as well, in a graveyard in Wales.
Yeah.
Very, very commonly found in graveyards. as
They
well.
are, yeah. They're planted as a kind of, because they live so long, they're planted as around graveyards as a symbol of eternity. Also in graveyards, they tend to have walls around, and older parks as well tend to have walls around, so it does keep the deer out and things that might eat. Well,
Yeah.
5 minutes left.
Yes, yeah, just about that. Do let us know if there's anything that you'd like to know more about, or if you have any questions.
Well, this is worth a look, actually. Just want to stop and have a look at it. This is a climber. It's called wild clematis, but nobody really calls it wild clematis. Most people call it old man's beard. And in Cornwall, they call it dead man's whiskers, which I think is a much better description for it. It's, if you snap it, I don't particularly want to snap it, but down here, if you snap it, it does kind of look whiskery. So sometimes when we take kids out on the project that we work on, we do kind of forest schooly bushcraft stuff. This is an excellent tinder for fire lighting, because it's very, very, and if you can get it when it's dry, it's very fibrous and it catches a spark really well. But yeah, it's wild clematis, and it climbs up our native tree. It does have a leaf on it, but they tend to be up higher, so I can't see any from down here. If we move back, you can see some up through there. But yeah, it's beautiful. It grows really well in the southwest. Not so good in the northeast where I'm from. Originally.
That looks like a kind of very long naked branch that's kind of dangling from the tree.
Yeah, it has these vertical kind of striations on it. It's and as I say, it comes off in little, peels off in smaller than millimeter fibers, so you can see there. But yeah, beautiful stuff.
We're getting a little bit of sunshine here now, which is very welcome after the rain.
So Hannah asked, is that like the parasites you see growing around other trees?
John, we had a question there about the wild clematis. Is it like a parasite?
I'm not sure if it's a Pete. You're the parasite man. Is it a parasite? I think it kind of lives in symbiosis, doesn't it, with tree species?
Could be, yeah. It could be kind of symbiotic, or I don't know whether, I think symbiosis is where both species gain something from the relationship, and maybe it's mutualism.
Okay.
Where there's like both species are able to tolerate and live with one another, and there are no negative effects.
Right.
But it's I don't know. I'd have to check that, but I don't think it harms the other trees, does it?
I don't not as far as I know.
Yeah, I think it might be mutualism, but I've not thought about that stuff for a couple of years now. So
I mean,
Yeah.
But
on
not
that- on that
harmful.
yeah, not harmful to the tree, but there are plenty. Like
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, as sort of as opposed to mistletoe, which is a parasite,
Yeah.
you know, because it feeds off the tree's resources, so it'll sap into its you know, sugar resources and you know, can sap some of its energy away. Talking about mistletoe, I did spot one. It's right up the
yeah.
top of there, though.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see if I can
oh yeah,
It's quite a big cluster.
see if I can show you through the gap. It might just look like the leaves of the tree from here.
And this has got really good.
You can see the
camera
kind of,
and zoom in.
yeah, there's like globe right at the top
There's a
there.
little bit
I don't know if
further
you can
down.
see there's a kind of round bit at the top of the tree, which is mistletoe.
the way that mistletoe spreads itself about as a parasite is quite interesting. So they have, I'm sure, yeah, there's sort of white berries that birds love to eat, but the berries themselves, when they're digested, they become really gluey. So when the bird flies off to another tree, it'll have and tries to go to the loo, it has to wipe its bum on the branch, leaving the seed and a load of kind of bird poo on there, which is great fertilizer for the mistletoe to grow.
That's
So it's
brilliant.
a really ingenious way of getting your seeds about.
Amazing.
You just made that up, didn't you?
It sounds good. It sounds plausible.
I'm conscious of the time now, so I think we might have to wrap up here unless there's any other questions from the chat, Emma.
No more questions that I can see. But yeah, thank you so much to all of you for sharing all your amazing knowledge. I love all of those stories, birds wiping their bums on trees and putting leaves in shoes. Yes, fascinating. And thank you so much for everyone who joined online for being up for this experiment. We'll be sending a feedback form around afterwards and some of the resources we talked about, and would really love just to hear what you think went well and what you think we could do to improve next time, because it'd be great if we could do more of this kind of thing so more disabled people can enjoy the lovely woods. If anybody hasn't yet and wants to join the creative session that's going to follow this, we'll be using some leaves and wooden things to make some art. If you could join that by the end of the day, that would be really helpful. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining, and have lovely days, lovely weeks. Hope to see you on another event at some point.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Someone's got things.
Yeah.